Chapter 14, The Planting of the Tree. "Well done," said Aslan in a voice that made the earth shake. Then Diggory knew all the Narnians had heard those words, and that the story of them would be handed down to father to son in that new world for hundreds of years, perhaps forever. But he was in no danger of feeling conceited, for he didn't think about it now that all he had was face to face with Aslan. This time he found he could look straight into the lion's eyes. He had forgotten his troubles and felt absolutely content. "Well done, son of Adam," said the lion. "For this fruit you have hungered and thirsted and wept. No hand but yours shall sow the seed of the tree that is to be the protection of Narnia. Throw the apple towards the river and where the ground is soft." Diggory did as he was told. Everyone had grown so quiet that you could hear the soft thump where it fell into the mud. "It is well thrown," said Aslan. "Let us now proceed to the coronation of King Frank of Narnia and Helen his queen." The children now noticed these two for the first time. They were dressed in strange and beautiful clothes, and from their shoulders rich robes flowed out beyond to where 4 dwarves held up the king's train and 4 river nymphs the queen's. Their heads were bare, but Helen had let her hair down, and it made a great improvement in her appearance. But it was neither her hair nor the clothes that made them look so different than their old selves. Their faces had a new expression, especially the king's. All the sharpness and cunning and quarrelsomeness which he had picked up in London as a cabbie seemed to have been washed away, and the courage and kindness which he always had was easier to see. Perhaps it was the air of the young world that had done it, or talking with Aslan, or both. "Upon my word," whispered Fletch to Polly, "my old master's been changed nearly as much as I have. Why, he's a new master now." "Yes, but don't buzz like that in my ear," said Polly. "It tickles." "Now," said Aslan, "some of you undo that tangle you have made with those trees, and let us see what we shall find there." Diggory now saw where 4 trees grew close together. Their branches had all been laced together or tied with switches to make sort of a cage. The 2 elephants with their trunks and a few dwarves with their little axes soon got it undone. There were 3 things inside. One was a young tree that seemed to be made out of gold. The second was a young tree that seemed to be made out of silver. But the third was a miserable object in muddy clothes, sitting hunched up between them. "Goodness," whispered Diggory. "Uncle Andrew." To explain all this, we must go back a bit. The beast, you remember, had tried to plant him and water him. When the watering brought him to his senses, he found himself soaking wet, buried up to his thighs in earth, which was quickly turning into mud, and surrounded by more wild animals than he had ever dreamed of in his whole life before. It is perhaps not surprising that he began to scream and howl. This was a good thing, for it last persuaded everyone that he was alive. So they dug him up again. As soon as his legs were free, he tried to bolt, but one swift curl of the elephant's trunk around his waist soon put an end to that. Everyone now thought he must be safely kept somewhere until Aslan had the time to come and see him and say what should be done about him. So they made some sort of cage or coop all around him. Then they offered him everything that they could think of to eat. The donkey collected great piles of thistles and threw them in, but Uncle Andrew didn't want those. The squirrels bombarded him with volleys of nuts, but he only covered his head with his hands and tried to keep out of the way. Several birds flew to and from diligently, dropping worms on him. The bear was especially kind. During the afternoon, he found a wild bee's nest, and instead of eating it himself, this worthy creature brought it back to Uncle Andrew. But this was in fact the worst failure of all. The bear lobbed the whole sticky mass on top of the enclosure and unfortunately hit Uncle Andrew slap in the face. Not all the bees were exactly dead. The bear, who was not at all minded being hit in the face with a honeycomb, could not understand why Uncle Andrew staggered back, slipped, and sat down. And it was sheer bad luck that he sat down on a pile of thistles. And anyways, as the warthog said, quite a lot of honey has got into the creature's mouth, and that's bound to have done it some good. They were really getting quite fond of their strange pet and hoped that Aslan would allow them to keep it. The cleverer ones were quite sure by now, at least, some of the noises which came out of his mouth had a meaning. They christened him Brandy because he made that sound often. In the end, however, they had to leave him there for the night. Aslan was quite busy that day instructing the new king and queen and doing other important things, and could not attend to poor old Brandy. With the nuts, pears, apples, and bananas that had been thrown into him, he did very well for supper, but it wouldn't be true to say that he had passed an agreeable night. "Bring out the creature," said Aslan. One of the elephants lifted Uncle Andrew into the trunk and laid him at the lion's feet. He was too frightened to move. "Please, Aslan," said Polly, could you say something to, unfrighten him? And then could you say something to prevent him from ever coming back here?" "Do you think he wants to?" said Aslan. "Well, Aslan, he might send someone else. He's so excited about the bar-off lamppost growing into the lamppost tree, and he thinks great folly, child," said Aslan. "This world is bursting with life for those few days because of the song which I called it to life, still hangs in the air and rumbles in the ground. It will not be for long. But I cannot tell that this old sinner, I cannot comfort him either. He has made himself unable to hear my voice. If I spoke to him, he would hear only the sounds of growlings and roarings. One of Adam's son, how cleverly you defend yourselves against all that might do you good. But I will give him only the gift he is still. I will give him the only gift he is still able to receive."